Accessing agent files. Brian Sovryn. Early 21st century anarchist. Creator and host of the podcast Sovryn Tech. By the year 2021, the show would be instrumental in the downfall of various conservative ideologies in the government, helping usher in an incredible time.
Hey, want to take a walk on the wild side and experience the bleeding edge of technology? Then get ready, because it doesn't get much more edgy than this. You're in for a wild ride. You're listening to Sovryn Tech with your host, the man in triple black, the Golden Stallion of the tech world, Brian Sovryn. He's got a huge brain. And now, here's Brian.
Oh, yes, it is that time again when the Golden Stallion is here with you for a little special, though not so little. I've actually got two talks from Keenevention 2014. The first one, of course, will be the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy, very apropos, hosting the Bitcoin panel, which I was on, and that was a lot of fun because actually, great guests on there. Of course, you'll hear the introduction for who all of them are. But towards the end, during the Q&A, somebody had a question. They had to ask about Bitcoin 2.0. And guess who got to take that question on? And it was great because people there were very gracious. The audience was very gracious. I actually got a bit of a standing O for my response to that question. So that was pretty cool. But anyway, I hope you enjoy this. I will be back in the middle of it, but check out this Bitcoin panel first. It was really good, especially had the guys from Lama Su there and had some really, really interesting things to talk about as far as what it's like being a full-on Bitcoin business with a total liberty mindset. I love the Harvey brothers. They're phenomenal. Also, Riaz Khan is there, and he is, oh man. This guy, has really big plans. So you get to hear about that. And of course, Daryl W. Perry, just a class act. And of course, then there's me and the lovely and hyper intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy on board. And it was really a great time overall. Stephanie and I are actually still going to do a wrap up special where we talk about our adventures in going to Syracuse, New York, and of course, our overall impressions of Keenevention. But bottom line is Keenevention, I thought, was a great success. It was really, a lot of great questions, a great audience there. In fact, if you head over to the website, keenevention.info, the keynote speech that James Cleveland gave was phenomenal. I don't have the audio for that, but I'll let Ian Freeman, who put on Keenevention, do all the releasing of that. But keep an eye out for that one. That was a great talk. He got a few standing O's, I think, during his. It was awesome. So anyway, here is the Bitcoin panel from Keenevention 2014. I'll come back in the middle of it, and then we'll go into the tech panel, and then I'll be back at the end of that. So enjoy, folks.
All right, everybody, welcome back from your lunch. I imagine a number of others will be coming in as they wrap theirs up. We did get kind of a late start. Keenevention tends to be relatively on time compared to some conventions out there, and so these next couple of panels, we have to sort of do a quicker version. One of the things that's nice about Keenevention is that we don't do these short panels typically. Typical panel length is like 45 minutes. And at Keenevention we do 75-minute panels, and they tend to go over most of them, so they end up being 90 minutes long in a lot of cases. So these two, because we have to be out of here by a certain time to get the room cleaned up and have everybody make it over to Social Sundays tonight. These are our basically hour-long panels, and they'll be back to back, followed by Rich Paul, our keynote speaker for today to wrap up Keenevention, and then of course Social Sundays is tonight at McHugh's. If you don't know where McHugh's is, I have maps at the registration table, so please come and see me. So this year we're reprising last year's panels. They were really great by two very talented panel hosts, and let's bring up Stephanie Murphy from Let's Talk Bitcoin and Free Talk Live. And she was the host of this very same panel last year, did an awesome job, and she's like Ms. Bitcoin, so why not have her back to do it all over again, except this time with a different panel of distinguished and a very large panel of distinguished guests, which I'm sure you will introduce. Welcome back to Keene Pension Stuff.
Thank you so much, Ian. It's great to be back. I'm really excited that we're doing this panel again. We've rotated the guests, so hopefully we'll get the maximum bang for your Bitcoin here. I'm Stephanie Murphy. I am the host of the podcast called Let's Talk Bitcoin. It comes out twice a week, and it's all about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and beyond. And you can find it at letstalkbitcoin.com. And I've got with me 5 gentlemen. You know, when I was trying to plan out this panel, I didn't think this many people would say yes. I kind of asked a bunch of people thinking that, oh, they're going to turn me down. They turned me down last year. I'm going to get rejected. It's going to hurt. So I'll just put out my feelers and ask as many people as I can. And lo and behold, these 5 fine gentlemen did say yes. So thank you guys for being on the panel. I'm actually really excited to have all of you here because I think all of you have something really cool to say about Bitcoin and specifically how it ties in with New Hampshire and freedom. So we've got Daryl W. Perry. He is the proprietor of FPP.cc, the Free Press Publications. He does all kinds of stuff, publishes a newspaper, is a book publisher, independent book publisher, accepts Bitcoin at his business, so that makes him a Bitcoin entrepreneur as well. Daryl, did I get all that right?
Yes, you did.
Okay, thank you. And Brian Sovryn. Brian is the host of the technology podcast Sovryn Tech. He was here in New Hampshire from the beginnings of the Bitcoin revolution, Bitcoin movement, and he's very knowledgeable about technology, security, has some interesting criticisms of Bitcoin 2.0 technologies, which we'll get into perhaps here on the panel, that I think he's becoming well known for. Brian, thank you for being here. Did I get everything right too?
Yeah, that works, though you didn't call me the Golden Stallion.
I'm sorry. Okay, cool. We'll have to talk about that later.
Is that because of the FISA court letter?
No, I'm safe. I've not been
Hashtag
contacted by the government yet. Anyway. We've also got Riaz Khan. He is the Agorist Taxi here in New Hampshire. I think you've already been outed as the Agorist Taxi that works for Bitcoin, giving people rides. Better than Uber, perhaps treats their employees a little bit better, doesn't support the police or the military like Uber does. And you also have had your part in organizing the Bitcoin meetups in Manchester, New Hampshire. So did I get all that right for you, Riaz?
Yep, it's all correct.
Awesome, thank you. Thank you for your service, by the way, I have to say. Taxi.
It's working the mean
Happy
streets.
customer, right?
We've already got a customer testimonial. So next we've got Josh Harvey. He is one of the co-founders of Llama-Su, which is a company that makes a Bitcoin machine. It's not exactly an ATM because it doesn't go both ways, or you can't really take cash out of it, but you can feed in your worthless fiats and get valuable Bitcoins out the other side, right, onto your phone. And created that with his brother, Zach, and Matt Whitlock, I think, was also the co-founder of Llama-Su. He's since left, but you guys started that company and since then have gone global, and now they are Llama-Su ATMs, they're vending machines, Llama-Su machines all over the world. You also took your machine to PorcFest, the Porcupine Freedom Festival, and somehow, in the middle of the woods with no internet, served the PorcFest community with Bitcoins 24/7 with this machine. And it was very handy there. I used it too. So Josh and Zach, welcome to the panel. Thank you for being here.
Thanks a lot, Stephanie.
Yes, and Zach, I guess I didn't really introduce you individually, but of course you're an individual. You deserve your own introduction.
That's all right. It's all right.
I'm sure you guys get that a lot. Like people kind of consider you like one entity. I will try to avoid doing that. You are both individual people and
Collectivist.
You each have something cool to say. So thank you. That's our introduction here for the panelists. And just a few words before we start. Bitcoin in New Hampshire has been just so exciting. I've been here from the beginning, and I just remember ever since Gavin Andreessen took Ian and Mark from Free Talk Live out to lunch back in 2011, was it? Sometime around there, many years ago. and told them about this new nerdy project that he was working on. It's called Bitcoin, and it's a way to have these tokens that you could transfer around online and send money value anywhere in the world. And the idea really caught on with them, and they started to talk about it on Free Talk Live. Bitcoin just took hold in this community of people who came to New Hampshire because they're interested in freedom. And it was so cool. It was really a natural fit with libertarians because, you know, I think all of us maybe have experienced a little bit of the financial oppression, you know, the war on cash that's happening. No, the government doesn't want you to be able to do transactions with financial privacy. They want to know every little bit that you spend and where you spend it and who you got it from so they can tax and track and control you. And I think a lot of the people who move to New Hampshire to get more freedom in their lives don't want to be subject to that kind of control. So Bitcoin was really a natural fit. It's also not war dollars. You know, it's not a currency that's used to fund threat, coercion, and theft around the world, destruction of people's property. And that is appealing to libertarians too. So with that introduction in mind, I would like everybody to just kind of talk a little bit about their business or project and how Bitcoin fits in with that. Like, tell me some stories and anecdotes about how you use Bitcoin in your work or how you first found out about it. I just want to hear like an interesting story from each person. Let's start with Daryl.
So I think it was about 2009 when I first heard about Bitcoin.
That's pretty early.
It was early.
Did you know Satoshi?
No, I did not. But the weird thing is, I was involved in the Ron Paul presidential campaign in 2008. I was one of the precinct coordinators and some other stuff. So I was a hard money guy. And at the CPAC in 2009, I was having a discussion with somebody, and this guy was saying, well, yeah, I agree that we need to get rid of the Fed, but we can replace it with having the Treasury just issue digits and then a completely digital currency that the Fed controls, and they can just inflate and they don't have to worry about firing up a printer and this and that. And I was like, that's a horrible idea. And it was several months later when I first heard about this cryptocurrency thing called Bitcoin, and I was like, this is that thing where they can just add money and hyperinflation in a snap of a finger.
No, that was FedCoin.
And
he was suggesting FedCoin.
Right, but it took me about a year and a half to realize that Bitcoin isn't this horrible thing that I thought it was. It's decentralized, and I kept asking people, what keeps it from just being inflated, on somebody's whim? And they're like, because of the coding. And I was like, okay, but you're saying it's open source. That means people can change the coding. And they're like, but the coding. And I'm like, something doesn't register here. And then ultimately somebody was like, okay, so parts of the coding can be changed, but the core of the coding can't be. And I was like, okay, and by that time, Bitcoin was at $5, and somebody said, I want to send you some Bitcoin. And I was like, don't really trust it, but okay. And so they sent me 8 of them, and then I sold them immediately. And then a few months later, the same thing happened where somebody sent me 5 Bitcoin that was worth $40, and I sold them immediately. And I wish I would have kept those first 13 Bitcoin that I received in those 2 transactions. So that was sort of my introduction, and I really started buying Bitcoin at the 2013 Liberty Forum, thanks in part to a little machine prototype that the 2 guys down at the end had. Because originally, the first time that Bitcoin hit $30 and then it almost immediately went back to 10, I was like, okay, well, maybe if it starts going up a little bit, I don't know, maybe. And then it started going up, and I was like, I'll buy when it hits 10, and then it hit 30, and I was like, I'll buy when it hits 10, and screw it, I'll just go ahead and buy, and then it's not seen $10 again since.
I remember saying the same thing myself. I was at the 2013 Liberty Forum. I remember walking out of a movie theater and seeing the Silver Circle premiere of that movie, and Roger Ver was there, and he excitedly walked over to me, and he goes, Bitcoin's at an all-time high, it's $33. And then thinking about it now, back at $33, today it's $300-something. It's 10 times that, and we've seen highs of $1,200. So That was really like a little cool piece of history there. So you were skeptical at first, but eventually you got on board. Brian, how about you? How did you first find out about Bitcoin, and what are your Bitcoin regret stories, if you have any, about selling it early or whatever? I think you have one of those stories.
Oh boy, yeah, I probably have some regrets as to the first time that I wasn't skeptical about it at all, but there's a kind of a funny reason why when I first heard about it. And I think I first heard about it on Free Talk Live, but I may have heard rumors of it a little bit before, so like it wasn't so odd when it just came to my ears through a podcast. Because I've been involved in the cypherpunk community for quite some time, so you hear things on forums and all about these kind of technologies. But at the time, in 2011, when I had heard it, I was still calling myself, not to say that I felt that way inside, but I was still calling myself a Christian. And this was on my path to some serious liberty. And as soon as I heard about this, and I went and I talked to my family and some other people about it, I said, it's like, wow, there's this currency, this could really be like this one world currency, and then suddenly everybody's, a one world currency. So the book of Revelation, and so as soon as I heard, because that's what the book of Revelation says, that there'd be a one world economy, not a one world government. It never says that, but it says there'd be an economy. And so as soon as I heard that this was like a problem for Christians, like, this has got to be great. I need this. I need this right now. But no offense to any Christians in the audience. But that was why I was so sure. I was like, wow, this is a great technology, because I was feeling very rebellious at the time. But all the same, it was very exciting when I read about it. There was a great book by Peter Ludlow called Cyberstates and Pirate Utopias that came out in 2001, which described quite a bit of what Bitcoin would eventually be. In fact, I half wonder at times if Peter Ludlow himself isn't Satoshi Nakamoto. But it's a fantastic book. Really, to see it all kind of start coming into fruition was really exciting for me. And I actually, I started mining it. I was working at a tech company at the time that did point of sale systems. And we had to burn in what they call burning in the registers, which was making sure, giving them an overnight test, running the RAM hard and the CPU hard and whatever. And so instead of actually running the normal test that we were supposed to do on these registers, I lined up 10, 15 of these registers and just plug in a bunch of USB drives and mining software on them. And got quite a few Bitcoin out of that, but unfortunately I sold out of those, 2012. I mean,
you were
really
proud that you
early.
sold them at $4,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, what a mistake that was. But that's how it goes. But now, I'm an ad exec for Free Talk Live, which is very exciting, and getting to work with the few Bitcoin companies, present company accepted, of course, that are willing to actually realize how important it is to get the Bitcoin message out there, even when it costs some money. It has been a real pleasure, to work with them, and they've generally been very up and up people.
So Brian, you went from thinking it was the mark of the beast to...
Well, that's what excited me about it.
You wanted the mark of the beast, all right. So Riaz, how did you find out about... What's your story with the Agoras Cab Company? How did you start doing that for Bitcoin? I mean, the market for rides in New Hampshire, there's got to be one there, but it's not big enough for Uber or Lyft really to come in. So how did you get into this?
Okay. I guess it all started in 2012. I was a big Ron Paul supporter for years. I was always pretty passionate about ending the Fed and auditing the Fed and all those different things. And I remember in December of 2012, I was listening to Free Talk Live. So it's another common place where people find out about Bitcoin. It was definitely the case for me. Heard Mark Edge talking about it incessantly for weeks, if not months, and finally got on the bandwagon around Liberty Forum of 2013, like maybe $15 or $20 per Bitcoin. And then I moved here to the Free State Project in September of last year, and in about around December, I just started giving rides to people. I just realized there's a lot of the community in Manchester that don't have vehicles. And I think Amanda Billy Rock was my first customer, and she offered to pay me some Bitcoin, and I didn't really think anything of it. I have a Prius. It only cost me, 50 cents to do a ride in gas. So she started paying me in Bitcoin $5 to $10, and after a couple of days, the word spread around that I was doing rides for Bitcoin. I had nothing to do with it. it just kind of spread around. And the next thing I know, my phone started blowing up every day, and now I've given rides to about 120 different ports.
Clearly a dangerous terrorist. I never saw one. Cool. All right. So, and we'll talk about, I guess, the Bitcoin meetups. But first, I want to hear from Josh and then Zach about, the beginnings of Lamassu, and like how long were you into Bitcoin before you decided, I think we can start a company here and do a service?
Yeah, actually, the Bitcoin meetups were a big part of Lamassu. When I found out about Bitcoin, it's a bit of a haze. It was probably around 2010. I just remember somehow finding the Bitcoin project page, and it was a very small page at that point, on the internet. My first reaction was, this is too weird. I wasn't that excited about it. And then I remember somebody on Facebook, a few months later, just one of my Facebook friends, libertarian guy, and I was in Israel at that point. He just posted on his wall, wow, Bitcoin's worth 25 cents. And I couldn't believe it because it didn't have a market value really when I first looked into it. And that's when I started taking it seriously. And you know what happens when you first learn about Bitcoin and get excited about it, you just don't eat or sleep for the next 2 weeks. Yep. And that was pretty much me reading the white paper, trying to figure out what was going on here. And then it got very exciting. The price started going crazy.
At the time when you first found out about it, were there any exchanges? Was Mt. Gox up yet?
Let's see, it was worth about 25 cents. I think that was pre-Mt. Gox at that point, or very, very beginnings. I couldn't get it. My first Bitcoin, I was trying to figure out who would sell me some Bitcoins, and there was the Web of Trust. That was the best way to get at that point, but I wasn't on the Web of Trust. So I somehow convinced this guy in New Zealand to take my, $12 of PayPal money, and he sent me some Bitcoins. But fast forward to move to New Hampshire in beginning of 2012, at the end of 2011, and it was really the 2012 Pork Fest. It was the first Pork Fest that I went to, and there was a bunch of Bitcoin activity going on there. And Eric Voorhees was there, a lot of the BitInstant guys were there, and that's when we kind of had this idea to start Bitcoin meetup in New Hampshire. Right after Pork Fest, we started the Bitcoin meetup. It's been going on every week since then.
I think it's maybe the longest running Bitcoin meetup in the country, or maybe
in the
even
world,
in the world.
Probably, yes. There wasn't a lot going on back in those days, and one of the things we started talking about at those meetups is, hey, what can we do? What does Bitcoin need? We decided it had to be easier for the average person to get themselves some Bitcoin, and that's when we started fooling around with the Bitcoin ATM idea. And at the same time, we were traveling around to all these different libertarian conferences, like Students for Liberty, all around the area. We went to New York, Boston, Philadelphia. We put on some Bitcoin conference in Philadelphia. So we did a bunch of stuff like that. A few of us were going around, and it was actually at the Students for Liberty conference. It was their global conference in Washington, D.C., where we first showed off our little wooden prototype Bitcoin machine.
And this is like January 2013?
This was February 2013, yeah.
Yep, okay.
And the week after that was Liberty Forum. And that's when it really blew up. CNET was there. They did an article on us, and the rest is pretty much history from there. So it really ties into Pork Fest, Liberty Forum, the New Hampshire Bitcoin community. In a very, very real sense, that's where the Bitcoin, the idea of the Bitcoin ATM, the Bitcoin machine really got to start.
So a real startup outside of the comfort of Silicon Valley. You guys were really intimately tied with the Free State Project and Liberty. That's cool. So Zach, maybe you could tell the story of getting ready for that 2013 Liberty Forum. Like, I know you guys had some crazy times. You were kind of hauling this machine around. It was a little bit rough around the edges. It was nuts and bolts were sticking out in different places. You guys have been up all night trying to get it ready. And this was when the Bitcoin price was on the move from hovering around $13, $10 up to about $30, and it's
Right.
never seen the light of $10 again. So tell me what that was like.
Well, it was crazy. I mean, for one, I think the hardest part was getting it ready for the conference right before Liberty Forum, which is the international, maybe the first international Students for Liberty convention in Washington, D.C., of course. And for us, I mean, this wasn't kind of like, okay, guys, how do we start this business? It was just a project. Like, hey, there's this machine we want to try to get together and show off because it's really awesome. Look, we put money in and you get Bitcoin. I mean, paper money. But part of it is that, we didn't really have specific roles or really a timeline for this. It was more of a like, oh no, this is happening like 2 days. What do we do? We don't have anything. And so the last 2-3 days, we were working like crazy. I mean, I think Matt was soldering like some things to the PCB board like about an hour and a half before the flight, and we had to just like grab him. And I remembered like we'd locked it. We were doing this all in the old. We had a guitar store in Madge for about 8 months. And so we had already decided to close that down, but we were using that store for putting all the pieces together because we couldn't really do it in the apartments.
Wow. I remember you guys were selling guitar stuff for Bitcoin, right? Really early
we were
on.
one of BitPay's first customers, I think.
Wow, fascinating.
Yeah. So I remember kind of like finally getting everything. We weren't, first of all, it didn't work yet. And then the graphics, we were just trying to we had like a sticker that we worked on, and we were just kind of like trying to get that. I don't even know if we put it on. We just didn't have any time in the flight. We had to leave for the flight. And I remember picking up all the pieces and going out and knowing that if we forgot any of the pieces, it just wouldn't work because, it's just a part you had to order from eBay. And so I remember we closed the door, and then I'm like, let me just check one more time. And I went in, and there was, like one of the small adapters or something. And I found it, so it's those little things. And then we rushed to the flight, made the flight, and in a way you're like, phew, we made it. And then you remember that nothing works yet. And so we got to the hotel room in Washington D.C. Maybe got something to eat. And then
how did you get it through the TSA?
Actually, we had we checked it.
Okay.
In pieces.
Right, in pieces. Right. So one guy took the screen, another guy took the bill acceptor, and then there's just like a wooden box. I think you're allowed to bring a wooden box. I mean, it was pretty small, but it was definitely in pieces. And then basically we're up, I guess, all night trying to get the last kinks of software. And so the first night we didn't have it ready, and then like the first day I went downstairs to kind of try to explain to people, and hype things up a bit, which of course created more pressure for Josh and Matt to work on the programming. And then at like 11 a.m. it's like I got like a eureka message, and then we had to all bring it down, and like we all had to hold the little part because if any of the wires would come out, of course it wouldn't work. And then we got it down. We actually got it working. And I mean, at this point, we hadn't even used it.
Then how did you know it worked?
We didn't. We knew that the software was...
Lights were blinking.
Right. And then we did one test run, and we were like, wow, this is easy. And then within 10 minutes, it was already like all over Twitter and everything. And so people were getting really excited about that.
So these people at the Students for Liberty conference knew what Bitcoin was and they wanted to buy it?
Yeah. I mean, the amazing thing is some of those guys at that point were already like, some of these 18 to 21-year-old guys were already talking about how they were Bitcoin millionaires. And that was
when it was like $10.
That was when it was going up to 30, and they're like, oh my God, I have so much money.
They're on an island somewhere now.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So there are a lot of rich libertarians out there. That's the good news. And then a week later, it was Liberty Forum, so it was a little bit more relaxed. We already knew we got it working once.
Wow.
And then right after that, we said, okay, people are getting excited about this little orange box, and then that's when we started working on kind of like a real model, a production model.
Wow.
And that's another crazy story.
Very cool. Well, I really appreciate hearing about that. It's quite a nail biter, getting that ready. But you guys made history, so kudos to you. I want to ask you, Brian, specifically. I know you talked before about how New Hampshire has really the potential to be like not Silicon Valley, but like maybe Milliard Valley or something like that. Maybe Josh, you came up with that phrase. I'm not sure, but there really does seem to be a hub of early Bitcoin adopters and Bitcoin activity and Bitcoin businesses in New Hampshire. And I just want to know, like, do you think New Hampshire could be the next Silicon Valley, and what would need to happen for that to occur?
Well, there's been a lot of write-ups recently, particularly coming from some luminaries like Tim Draper and others, that pretty much Silicon Valley itself only has a good 2 years left, that it's in a pretty serious bubble, and that actually anywhere where Bitcoin is really taking hold could be the next Silicon Valley. And Bitcoin's abilities, or at least blockchain technology's ability, seems pretty limitless. Your imagination's is the ceiling. And with that, I mean, if you could create an area like New Hampshire, and it could be anywhere in New Hampshire, it could be Keene, you take your pick, where those businesses could thrive, you have a pretty golden opportunity to be the center of the world, much like Silicon Valley is. And I agree with the assessment that Silicon Valley really is going to fall apart pretty fast because there's no innovation coming out of there whatsoever. As to where I think there's plenty of really bright guys right here in New Hampshire that could definitely take advantage of this lack of innovation.
Yeah, we got a real talent hub here that I'm I don't want to say I'm proud to be from New Hampshire or like I'm proud of it because I had nothing to do with it, but it's cool to live in a place where there's so many Bitcoin experts, I guess.
And with Bitcoin, you don't have to ask for permission. Just do your business.
Yeah.
And you have a huge community here that will back you up when you take the risk. And that's really the beauty of New Hampshire, is the community that you have to let you do what you have to do, again, without asking permission. Just start your business and make it happen.
Yeah, so speaking of which, that's a perfect segue into what I wanted to ask you, Riaz. Have you had any trouble from the authorities with your taxi business? I mean, you really couldn't get a job with Uber or Lyft, even if you wanted to, because they don't serve this area. They don't consider it important enough right now. You are basically just starting your own independent business. Have you had any trouble from the police or any issues that you want to talk about?
One of the most unique things about my business is, and this is one of the most beautiful things about it, is that my clientele is literally only porks. So it's exclusively just people I'm actually friends with, pretty much for the most part. Living in Manchester, where there's so many social activities every day, it's pretty easy to meet 300 porcupines within a few months that I lived here at that point.
And for people who may be listening on the internet, a porcupine is like a nickname for a person who moved to New Hampshire to get more liberty.
Collectivist. Exactly. So my clientele are all people I know, so it's pretty exclusive. It's not marketed toward the greater public or the populace of the city.
So you don't need to expand out with your business model. You've got enough business just from basically giving friends rides?
Exactly, yeah. And there's no marketing needed. It was all word of mouth that just spread organically through Facebook and in-person social activities that happen frequently in Manchester.
You got some news coverage though, didn't you? You got like local news coverage, and I don't know, I'm always seeing like every time I go to an airport outside of New Hampshire and I request an Uber ride or something like that, they'll say stuff like, well, meet me on the third level, because the first level, that's their territory, the taxis, and the cops wait there for us, and they don't like it. So, I mean, you have had some media exposure. How did that go?
Yeah, actually, at Liberty Forum of this year, I was doing a lot of rides directly for the Free State Project for their events, one of which is Liberty Forum, which brings several hundred people to, well, this year it'll be Manchester, New Hampshire, in a convention format similar to this one, similar to Keenevention, but on a larger scale. And I was doing a lot of rides. That was a very busy period for the week, and I was doing rides for a lot of the guest speakers. One of which was Kashmir Hill, who's a reporter or a writer for Forbes.com, and she went ahead and included a couple paragraphs about me in an article about the Free State Project.
And she has written about living on Bitcoin. She's written a lot about Bitcoin in Forbes, so you're probably familiar with her stuff if you're listening to this.
Absolutely. Yeah, Thankfully, for some reason, I haven't had any trouble with the authorities, even though my Facebook is public. I have a Facebook-like page for AgriCab. Uber has entered the market recently in New Hampshire just in the last week. They're expanding on a very slow, they're just kind of picking up at this point in the very early stages. And they said that there's actually no laws that they're breaking with their operations here. So I'm not sure. That kind of gives me the green light to expand to the greater population now and start marketing outside of the community.
So here's a question. Do you want to join Uber, or would you rather keep working for yourself? And I mean, Uber doesn't accept Bitcoin, right? So
exactly. There's a lot of ways to compete with Uber and still have an edge on them, considering they don't accept cash in any aspect. They don't accept Bitcoin. They report all the income to the IRS and things like that.
Our audience does not like this.
So some of my aspirations for the future include maybe competing directly with Uber and creating an app and literally just going head-to-head with them at some point.
Wow, that's cool. All right. Well, we wish you good luck providing voluntary services to people in a peaceful manner. Love it. Daryl, how do you see Bitcoin helping with independent publishers? Because I know there's a lot of issues that maybe motivated you to get into independent publishing in the first place.
Right. So with the quote unquote mainstream publishers, or actually I would say probably a good many of the libertarian publishing companies, there actually are one or two others that exist. They still abide by copyright laws, and they want you to sign over the copyright to them. And I don't really believe in the current copyright laws as they exist. I think they're totally flawed, and I don't want to have to sign over my rights to somebody else, especially when I want to put the stuff out under a Creative Commons license or a copyright license. So, I don't want to submit my stuff to Penguin Press or Random House or whoever, and then, one, probably get a rejection letter, and two, them say, okay, well, we want the copyright. And I'm like, no, screw you. So it was mainly the copyright issue that caused me to, look into how to do this independent publishing thing. And there's another issue, and right now there's not really a way to get around this if you want, like Amazon and Barnes and Noble and Books A Million to carry your stuff, and that is the International Standard Book Number, called an ISBN. That every book published that is carried on Amazon, unless it's something that was printed before the creation thereof, before the creation of the ISBN, not before the creation of Amazon. Amazon will not carry a book that does not have an ISBN, unless you somehow jump through all of their hoops and hurdles to become your own distributor, and that's a pain in the ass to even begin the process. So I found a company that is actually a subsidiary of Amazon. So I've got this weird love-hate relationship with Amazon. And the cost of a single ISBN from Bowker, which is the only company in the United States that you can buy an ISBN number from, cost $125. If you want to buy more than that, you can buy 10 of them for $250. You can buy 100 of them for $600, 1,000 for $1,000, and then it goes down from there. So it's one of these things where it's, you save money if you buy in bulk, but it doesn't cost them any extra money because they just have some weird random computer thing that generates the number. So it doesn't cost them extra money to just send you one, but they want to charge you an exorbitant fee. And I would love to see some sort of blockchain technology be able to be used to replace the ISBN. And I'm sure to completely do away with that, there's all kinds of international treaties that would have to be done away with to get widespread acceptance. But I think that it's something that it has potential, and I don't know how to do it. So if there's anybody that knows how to create a blockchain sort of thing, I'll throw my idea out there. I want to sort of take from the best of various cryptos, NXT being one of them, to where they do a proof of stake instead of a proof of work. Meaning that as long as you are running the client and you have some of their coins, then you wind up getting some of the forging fees, which is what they call it, instead of a miner's fee. So what I would love to see is something to where people can run this client and it keeps the, whatever we're going to call the replacement to the ISBN, it keeps that log running. And people just, create an address and then attach a book name to it. And then I don't want there to be any fees involved at all. So if somebody can figure out how to do that, then run with it. I'm claiming no ownership of the idea.
Wow, yeah, I really like that idea. Maybe it could be sort of like a decentralized Kindle type thing where you're opening a reader and the reader is actually forging with a proof of stake coin that somehow has a blockchainized record of the ISBN numbers. Or the equivalent, yeah.
I love it.
Cool. Well, if anyone wants to get in touch with Daryl about that, his website, fpp.cc, you can contact him there. And cool, I hope that happens. I would like to decentralize that process for sure. So, Josh and Zach, I wonder if you could maybe speak a little bit about some of the regulatory issues or hurdles that you've overcome. You've kind of taken a different route than perhaps the flagrant lawbreakers on this panel, the other panelists. You've kind of sort of gone, tried to comply within reason and not completely destroy your business model, but get it out there in a way that most people can access. So what have been your most difficult challenges in that realm? Because I'm sure there are some.
So first of all, we're just a manufacturer of these machines. We don't actually operate any of them. These money transmitting laws don't apply directly to our business, but they.
Did you adjust your business plan based on?
Yes, we were careful about that, and that probably informed a lot of our decisions, the way we decided to go about the business. But at the same time, we want our operators in the United States and around the world to be able to deploy these machines without worrying about things, and especially in the United States, the money transmitting laws are incredibly draconian. The penalties for even small problems with your money transmitting, licensing, and compliance could end up costing you decades in jail, or at least that's what the prosecutors are seeking. There have been a number of cases in the Bitcoin community of prosecutors going after friends of ours and threatening people with 20, 30 years in jail. Wow. So it's something that people have to be very careful about, especially if they're deploying a public machine in a retail location. It's not something they can really hide or keep secret. One of the things we've been doing is looking at the FinCEN guidance, and the problem with that is it keeps on shifting. It seems like they're changing their minds of whether they want to take a step back from regulating everything Bitcoin, or whether they want to kind of broaden it so that they're regulating more and more. And in the last few days, FinCEN has put out some new guidance, which looks like they're trying to regulate more. Like they're trying to go beyond possibly what the original laws say and broaden those laws so that they apply to more people. Specifically, that could include people who operate a Bitcoin machine.
So like if someone owns a restaurant and has a Lamassu machine in their restaurant, then they could potentially be labeled as a money transmitter?
It's not really a question of who owns the space, but of who is operating the machine. So it could be somebody coming in, making an agreement with the restaurant owner to place a machine there. The restaurant owner wouldn't need to be licensed, but the person operating the machine would have to be, if that's considered a business that's a money transmitting business.
So Stephanie, I don't know who you're calling lawbreakers. I have an intergalactic bit license that authorizes the bearer of this card, or rather it recognizes that the bearer of this card has a natural and inalienable right to financial freedom and privacy. This includes, but is not limited to, possession, transfer, transmission, uttering, passing, laundering, mining, hoarding, sending, receiving, and earning of Bitcoin. So I do have a license.
Excellent, excellent.
Did you make that?
No, I did not.
Can people buy them?
Bitcoin.bombs.com.
Cool. Yeah, so, I mean, Zach, maybe you could speak to this. I've noticed some of your competitors, like the competitors to Lamasu, because you guys were the first in your industry, but there have been lots of others competing, including some kind of scary ones that literally will take your handprint, will take a picture of you.
That's RoboCoin.
Yeah, there's others too. I mean, they have these complicated instructions on how to create an account, like hanging on the machine, that include, we need everything from a DNA sample to, to your picture, to your government issued ID and your passport. And I mean, it's getting to a level that's really crazy. And you guys have managed to pretty much avoid going there for the time being, right? Is that because you're only going from cash into Bitcoin and not the other way, and you're only making the hardware, as you said, as Josh said, and not actually operating it?
I don't think it's because, it's because it's one way.
Or has there been like an ideological reason for not going there? That's what I'm really getting at.
Well, there's always an ideological reason for not wanting to go there, but then there's also the practical reason of how do you get enough machines out there. And if you can't launch a machine in a certain area without some kind of compliance solution, or people will go to jail, then the operator of that machine is going to want to have some kind of compliance solution so he can operate the machine without going to jail to the best of his ability. For one, I don't think that the compliance solution that some of our competitors are offering are necessary, and I do think that they're very intrusive. So even from a user, even if I believed in regulation, it's intrusive and it's a bad user experience. And there's from any of the regulation that I've seen or read, there was no mention of a palm scanner or anything that would be recognized from a government level. So I don't even think it's something that's necessary. I think you have to look and see what is necessary for the government to say, okay, this machine, as far as I'm concerned, you are now compliant. You're doing what you have to. So for that, we just talk to our operators and say, well, what jurisdiction are you in? What do you need? And especially at an earlier stage, the U.S. market was really small for us. Part of the reason was regulation. They didn't even want to try to, people were terrified of even touching it. And so for, some of the places we have in Europe, under 15,000 euros, you don't have to do anything. So that's basically, it's not a priority for us right now. We don't have to start figuring out how to make our user experience more difficult and complicated if there's not demand from our operators. So the first stage, it obviously makes using our machine a lot easier if you don't have extra steps. It's just 3 steps. You just go to the machine, you press start, scan your QR code, put in cash, press send, and go home. And then compared to all these other processes where, it takes, 15 minutes to be verified on the system, and then by the time it gets sent to you from Bitstamp and, the transactions clear, etc., there are people that, 24 hours later and they still haven't received their Bitcoins. So I think there are 2 aspects to it. One of it is just pure user experience. The other part of what is required from us. What are the priorities of our operators? What do they need? And as we started getting more U.S. and Canadian operators that say, listen, we're starting to get pressure and we can really only launch this if we have a compliance solution, that's when we started looking into it, and that's when we started going to a third-party service that provides a compliance service, and we just integrated it into our system in a really simple way. That somebody just goes in the machine, it's one extra step, they scan in their driver's license, it makes sure they're not on any government list, and then it's, okay, you can do it. It's not as intrusive.
What list is it check against?
What's that?
What list is it checking against?
All
of
your
all
favorite
on a
lists. Of course we're all on some list, but I mean...
Probably the terror watch list, if I had to guess.
There are a few lists that probably none of us in the room are actually on. So I don't think it's probably pretty rare that unless you're on IS or something, the Islamic State, and they know about it, then you may be on one of those lists. But I don't think it's not the kind of thing that anybody in this room that I'd expect to be on one of those lists.
All right. So I have two more questions for the panel, and then I guess maybe we'll have some time to open it up for audience questions. Can you just put up your hand if you have a question you want to ask the panel? Okay. So we got a couple of questions.
There's a mic that they could start lining up at. I guess.
Sure. Let's do that. So we've got about 12 minutes left. So just real quick for Riaz and Josh and Zach, can you just describe what a Bitcoin meetup is like in New Hampshire? We've got the longest running Bitcoin meetup here in Manchester, New Hampshire. What could someone expect if they went to one of those? Like, paint a picture.
It's quite incredible coming from Florida and seeing this for the first time when I got here about a year ago and coming to my first Manchester Bitcoin meetup. On average, there's maybe like 25 or 30 different people there that are all engrossed in Bitcoin or enthralled in it in such a manner that can't even be described. And there's so much technical knowledge going around the room that it can be a little convoluted and esoteric conversation for anyone sitting at tables around the area that are not with us. But it always piques interest among people that are in the room that are not with our group, or people overhear things, and we have people coming up to us and realizing that we're talking about Bitcoin.
Is there trading that goes on?
Yeah, absolutely. There's never a case where you can come to one of the Bitcoin meetups in Manchester and not find someone who's willing to buy or sell, any amount up to a few $100s worth of Bitcoin, probably. And we're talking about at spot where there's no premium. It's extremely easy to trade Bitcoin within our community. That's probably one of the main shining characteristics of the meetups is how liquid the community is as far as Bitcoin transactions. It's a part of our lives that pretty much everyone that comes to the Bitcoin meetups, or even the greater community in Manchester and in the area, probably use Bitcoin a number of times every single day in their regular lives.
Cool. So if you're in Manchester, New Hampshire, you people out there on the internet, I'm looking at you, you should stop by the Bitcoin meetups in New Hampshire. They're usually on Sunday nights, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. It's every Sunday at 6 or 7 o'clock. 6 o'clock in the evening every Sunday night. It's never really changed. It's always at Strange Brew Tavern on Market Street in Manchester.
There's two, right? There's one.
There's only one Manchester Bitcoin meetup.
All right, and then just real quick for Brian and Daryl, either one of you who wants to take this. I know both of you are interested and have spoken before about altcoins or just alternative uses of blockchain technology. What, if any, of those do you see as having particular relevance for New Hampshire or for the Liberty community or for the Free State Project or anything like that?
I don't know. I'll let Brian actually answer the question, but I have gone on record in the past as saying that Bitcoin is the Roman chariot of currencies. And what I mean by that is, the Roman chariot was sort of the first real mode of transportation that people had. And it's not really being used a lot right now. And I foresee that, in the future, I'm not going to project how far, but, in the future, there's going to be something like Bitcoin that definitely is the standard mode of transportation. Bitcoin might still maybe exist in several hundred years. I don't really know, but I'll let Brian actually answer the question.
Sure. I think NXT is definitely one of them, which Daryl mentioned earlier, is one of the more interesting ones, particularly because right now, existing right now, is a free market exchange that the world has never seen, that we know of. Maybe in some pirate, Libertatia in Madagascar or something that existed, but it's never existed at any other time. And where you can literally, trade goods and do all the financial stuff that you're used to doing in the world today. So I think that's a pretty interesting one. But the more interesting one is I really think there should be an FSP coin. I think there should be a New Hampshire coin or whatever, Shire coin, whatever you want to call it, because I don't believe that there should be one currency. Quite frankly, I think that specie, and like specialization is the key to a really great economy, and having a whole slew of coins is a wonderful thing that can address the specific needs of a specific area. Like in New Hampshire, you have the White Mountains. Okay, Bitcoin doesn't work in the White Mountains. There's no internet. What are you going to do? And so, coming up with coins and things of that nature are probably a lot easier than actually creating further infrastructure. And this is the libertarian dream where, North Dakota has its own bank. Well, the Shire could have its own bank too, or not a bank, but they could have their own financial system if they want it with something like ShareCoin. So I think that would be a really great innovation, and I think it would have genuine value because clearly there's people here in this audience. There's value here, right there. So I think that would be interesting. But otherwise, yeah, NXT would be intriguing.
Cool. All right, let's open it up to questions from the audience. Let's have Matt.
So yeah, I listen to Free Talk Live some of the time, and before it begins, I hear Daryl, list that day's price for gold, silver, and Bitcoin. I noticed that gold and silver haven't been doing very well lately. So what I'm wondering is the stagnation that we've seen throughout the majority of this calendar year with the price of Bitcoin. Do you think that that's due mostly or perhaps entirely to a larger dynamic whereby like the Federal Reserve is doing their shenanigans and like suppressing the price of all alternative media of exchange?
I don't know. It would be easier to say, yeah, the Fed, they're suppressing blah blah blah, but maybe that's a conspiracy theory. Maybe it's conspiracy fact. I don't really know, but it's one of those things to where there's so many different factors at play to where I don't think anybody really knows what it's going to do. I remember last year about this time when Bitcoin was hovering around $200. From like the time of PorkFest 2013 until late October of last year, it was around 100. Then it started creeping up to 200, and then the next thing I know, it's 400, then 800, and then 1,000. And when it was like $1,100 per Bitcoin is when I actually sold a car to Rob Matthias for Bitcoin in what is believed to be the first ever person-to-person vehicle transaction anywhere in the world. It's not the first time that anybody bought a car with Bitcoin because somebody did buy a car directly from Tesla with Bitcoin.
Cool, all right. And unfortunately, I don't think the mic was on for that last question from
He
Matt.
just wasn't close enough, I don't think.
No, we turned it on. But the question, for the recording purposes, the question was basically, is there manipulation going on with the
Is it?
No, we don't have time. We'll go to Emmanuel. Yeah, we're just trying to
clarification, where it's nothing with Bitcoin itself, where there's a larger trend of all alternative media of exchange in general being suppressed. So there's not, no inherent flaw or nothing with just Bitcoin.
All right, cool. Let's go to Emmanuel.
Okay, so my question is more future projected. So we had maybe a couple of weeks ago the first Bitcoin marriage or blockchain marriage
that actually didn't get recorded because blockchain or the Bitcoin software had taken the notes on. They deactivated the ability to add a note to a transaction, so that Bitcoin marriage that was supposed to have happened never actually got recorded on the blockchain.
Okay, you're off the hook. Okay, so that's
probably for the best.
Yeah. All right, so my question is more in the future. I've heard of the Ether coin or whatever. So I was wondering what other use of the blockchain you can see. Do you see like crypto voting or the blockchain being used as for passport or international ID or anything like that?
Sure. There's a lot of that getting developed. Actually, Chris Ellis came up with this cryptographically secure passport. There's a lot of people talking about doing voting, but in my opinion, all these are terrible ideas. First off, putting X onto a blockchain is not innovation. Okay, and if X isn't a good idea without a blockchain, that doesn't mean it's a good idea once it's put on a blockchain. Okay, so yeah, any of these government services or whatever that they want to do is just an atrocity waiting to happen. I'm not saying it's necessarily Skynet, but like even voting. Voting is a good one that a lot of people like to bring up because it's so easy to implement. But voting, the most powerful aspect of voting, and this is a particularly powerful one legally in New Hampshire, as I understand it, is the secret ballot. You're not going to have a secret ballot when there's cryptography that can get cracked at some point. It doesn't exist. There's always a record of that, which you don't want. That's the whole point. It's the whole beauty of voting, quote unquote, if there is a beauty, is the secret ballot. Okay, and I'm not saying that there's a beauty to it. So yeah, that's my opinion on that.
And passport, international ID?
International ID, again, that's something that's being developed. I'm not a fan necessarily of passports because really any kind of ID system just too much reminds me of papers, please, papers. And even if it's voluntary, it may work if it's voluntary, but then the question becomes just like U.S. citizenship. Sure, your U.S. citizenship is voluntary too, but try leaving, with your skin still anyway, and you're in for some trouble. So it depends on, the question becomes with like an ID system, what happens if I want to leave or revoke it? And if there are stipulations, I don't feel that that's freedom.
And for a lot more on that, you can tune into Brian's podcast, Sovryn Tech, Sovryn Tech, a weekly show where he discusses a lot of these issues in depth. And just maybe one quick last question from Aaron.
I know that in BitTorrent technology, I saw over time that the media industries kind of had to grow to compete. They couldn't directly use force against the users. They had to compete and make things easier and split things up. I see currency as something directly competing with government. Do you foresee a method in which the government may try and clamp down on you, though it's decentralized, or how will they?
They're already trying to clamp down by instituting all of these weird, goofy, conflicting rules where FinCEN says that Bitcoin is money, the IRS says that Bitcoin is property, and the New York Department of Financial Services is trying to say that if anybody accepts Bitcoin and one of their customers may have driven through New York that one time, that you have to get name, date, serial number, semen count, and everything else in order to be able to do business with, and you have to collect that for all of your customers everywhere in the world because that one guy drove through New York that one time. So you do have government agencies that are trying to prevent it. And what I think most of us up here are trying to do is find loopholes around what the government is trying to do. And I have actually gained some level of notoriety because, as far as is known, I'm the first presidential candidate anywhere in the world to accept Bitcoin. And I actually wrote a letter to the FEC, which is the Federal Election Commission, saying this is the last letter, the first and the last letter that you will ever receive from me. I am not abiding by any of your laws. I think that all of your laws are bupkis, and I will be accepting Bitcoin and other alternative forms of currency. So I think that I can speak for at least Brian and Riaz in saying that we're trying to find ways around their regulations, and I don't really care what the regulations are.
Now, what I want to know is, was the word bupkis really used in the letter?
No.
All right, so I think we're out of time. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you want to hear more from me, you can go to letstalkbitcoin.com, subscribe to the podcast. It comes out twice a week. Daryl is at fpp.cc.
fpp.cc. The audio is fppradio.com. And I actually have to go jump in the Nautilus, drive to the LRN studio, and I've got a show in like half an hour.
Thank you for being here, Daryl. Brian's at Sovryn Tech, SOVRYNTech.com. Riaz, do you have anything? Find you at the Manchester Bitcoin meetups? Do you have a website or anything?
You can find me on Facebook under AgoraCab.
Did you register Agora.cap yet?
I might be changing the name of the project eventually, I'm not sure.
Oh, exciting things to come. And Josh and Zach, Lamasu Bitcoin Machine, where's your website?
Yeah, lamasu.is, so that's LAMASSU.is.
IS is for Iceland, by the way.
Iceland?
It's not IS.
Okay.
They have to change it in the future.
I don't think they've gotten UN
All right.
recognition yet.
And the Lamasu, the Sumerian beast of liberty. Thank you guys so much. Let's have a big round of applause for our panelists. Thank you so much for being here.
Wow, great panel, really informative as expected, and we got another one coming up almost immediately. If you need a quick break, we'll take one for just a couple minutes, and then we'll have our technical panel, the tech panel, come on up and take the stage.
All right, there you have it. Can you beat that kind of action? Really. A wonderful time. Again, it was great that people got to get in there with some really good questions. And of course, all the panelists were phenomenal. I really enjoyed it. But now let's get right on to the next panel. And these really did happen back to back at Keenevention. And again, both were, very appropriately running back to back because they definitely dovetailed into each other. Even though I tried to kind of like make Bitcoin not part of the tech panel. That kind of happened last year where Bitcoin questions got asked quite a bit. Of course, Bitcoin was definitely, on a much hotter run last year during Keenevention. So, but this was a great tech panel. We got to talk a lot about startups. We got to talk a lot about not just tech, but science, because I got to have Max Pito, who's a good friend and, just a phenomenal guy. He was there to talk about something that I've mentioned on Sovryn Tech before, listeners will remember, when I talked about biopunks. This is a real live biopunk here, okay? Or at least, a biotech guy that works for Sens. And at some point, boy, I'd love to have him on Sovryn Tech. But anyway, you're really going to love this. Had Johnson, who you may know from Free Talk Live if you're a listener of that. I love having him on board with just about anything I do, because his bullshit meter is, set to kill. It's not set to stun. It is set to kill. And I really like that, because he'll even, correct me sometimes. But admittedly, in this one, actually, there's a point where he tried to correct me. I ended up being right, but you can listen up for that. Not that we're keeping score. We very, very friendly conversations always with Johnson. So anyway, Steve Zamenek was there, very knowledgeable guy, who's really the backbone of tech in the Keene area. So it was really great to have him. We were supposed to have a third panelist on there, or a fourth panelist, I'm sorry, that was supposed to be on there. And he actually, there was a bit of drama around him being on or not being there, because I don't know, he screwed up a million. Who knows what's true? That's the bottom line. So, but he was going to talk about game design, because there was a game that he apparently, quote unquote, was working on. And regardless, that he wasn't there, and whether that game is, if he has anything to do with it, that's a whole other story. But it really just gave me the opportunity, to talk a little bit about Zomia offline games. I didn't mention Hypercronius by name, but, just to bring up that, I'm a one-man, game dev team here, putting stuff together. And so it was great to get that out as well. So, listen up for that. I'll come back at the end of the tech panel. It was really enjoyable. We got to go kind of into overtime. Ian Freeman was very gracious about that, and we got some pretty good questions towards the end of it. So, do check this out. A lot of great info, for not just for cypherpunks, but for biopunks, the whole gamut. If you're interested in science and technology, there's something here for you. And certainly a lot of discussion of real incentives about coming to New Hampshire in general, just by, kind of the system that exists as it is. So take a listen, and I'll be right back after the panel's done.
So, with no further ado, going to bring our next panel host up. He'll tell you more about our esteemed technical wizard panelists here. The technology panel host of Sovryn Tech, Brian Sovryn, is back for it. He did it last year, and, he hosts a show about tech. So he seems like the appropriate guy to host this panel. And he really is very, very knowledgeable about these topics, as are the guests. We'll learn more about them here in a moment. And of course, the mic will be open for questions for you as well. So welcome back, Brian Sovryn from Sovryn Tech. Appreciate it, man.
Thank you very much. All right. So real pleasure to be doing this again. Last year's panel was fantastic. Always technology and science, which we're actually going to touch into both in a way, is the genuine ever-evolving topic. And it's something where you could actually, we have a different panelist here this year, but I could bring in the same guys pretty much every year, and there are completely new questions and completely new answers to really get addressed and solved. So it's really great to have really brilliant people here in New Hampshire that can address the ever-evolving world of science and technology. Myself, of course, as Ian mentioned, I'm a host of the podcast Sovryn Tech, which you can listen to at SOVRYNTech.com. Myself, I've been a cypherpunk for, over 15 years now. I wouldn't mind calling myself that. But, an area, and because I'm going to let my panelists introduce themselves, but an area that doesn't get described enough, and it's only recently started to get some attention. And I think it needs attention, particularly in New Hampshire, especially when earlier you had a great secessionist panel, is the area of biopumps. Now, cypherpunks, if you don't know what that is, that's people that are interested in cryptography and technology in general, okay, and pretty much interested in your privacy. And biopumps are your scientists, your biologists, whichever, that are doing things without the permission per se, or at least with as little as possible, but they are the entrepreneurs in the science space. And I am really glad to have one of those here, and I'm going to let him introduce himself, and then I'll let the other two panelists as well. Max Pito.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Max Pito. So the biotech area that I work in is, some of you, I'm going to introduce myself. I work for the SENS Research Foundation. Maybe some of you have heard of a guy named Aubrey DeGray with a huge beard who wants to, what he calls, cure aging. So I work in longevity science. Basically, the projects that I work in try and figure out what goes wrong with us as we get older on a molecular level, and then trying to figure out exactly how to fix those things that go wrong as we get older. So I have a number of projects that I work on that are all related to that topic, longevity research.
Okay, yeah, and I mean that's one of the real keys to perhaps beating the state is to outlive it. And so if Max's work could help us live forever, maybe we can outlive these empires, because every empire ends, right? Steve Zamanek, if you'd introduce yourself and a little bit of what you do.
I'm Steve Zamanek. I lived in the Keene area for about 5 years. Do small business computer consulting right now, kind of freelance. I'm kind of a behind-the-scenes activist here in New Hampshire.
You're really solving in Keene. You're solving a lot of the tech issues that really come up. You're
right.
You're the guy behind the scenes, making sure that everything actually works
right.
in a real way.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Johnson.
I'm Johnson Rice. I've been in Keene for about 2 years now. I'm a longtime host of Free Talk Live, and I am a designer. So if this were sort of like the TED of panels here, I'd be the design portion of that. I've done this. I helped to put this together. I didn't actually design the Free Keene banner, but I've done a lot of the flyers and whatnot that you see around. And so that's really my sort of involvement is in being behind the scenes activism, is that I put together a lot of the literature that you will see getting passed around.
Also, he's one of the few guys that I can talk about like any up and coming like tech news, and he's really on the pulse. And often he'll actually call me out on a lot of crap too, which is great. So I love having him around. But anyway, let's get into the questions. We've got a few here, and then of course we will open it up to questions from the audience. But I guess I'll start off, and actually, Johnson, I'd like to start off with you. What do you think is the importance of activists having knowledge, like I mentioned you have, and awareness about science and tech in New Hampshire? Like, how does that apply to activists?
Okay, so I think three things. I think it increases employability, it increases respectability, and I think it increases believability. Especially a background in science and getting at least basic science literacy, I think it helps with an inoculation against believing in random conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that runs rampant in the liberty movement in general. Just among these particular circles, there are a lot of people who are predisposed to questioning things and question everything to the point of where they think that this must be what's going on, because they don't have an understanding of what's going on. I actually printed out for this the scientific method, which I don't think that a lot of people who have don't even have a basic understanding of science understand what the scientific method is, because they only get through the first half of it. And I think the first half of the scientific method is essentially what makes people into a conspiracy theorist, which is it is ask a question, do background research, and construct a hypothesis. And I think most people stop there. And they just are hypothesizing and just throwing random wild accusations out there. The last part of the scientific method is to test your hypothesis by doing an experiment, to analyze your data and draw a conclusion, and then to communicate your results, and to start over again, and to continue going through that process over and over and over again to try and solidify your information. And I think
you want to falsify your claims.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't think that a lot of people get that far.
Yeah, no, I agree. And actually, one of the points of I mentioned biopunks earlier. One of the things they say is that people need to have scientific literacy, not just understanding of what's going on, but literacy, meaning that you can practice it. Did you have more on that, Johnson, or is that?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. I just think that people need to get their facts straight and to really not just get to that hypothesis part and really take it a step further. I think what it is it's essentially, I think that people who are into conspiracy theories are essentially doing lazy science. They get halfway through and just stop and think that their guess and their hypothesis that they've come up with is acceptable without really doing anything or looking up anybody who has gone in and done actual testing and actual getting results and actually working with, I've got 9/11 going through my head because that's something that the average layperson couldn't go and test. I mean, you're not going to be able to go and build a skyscraper and test it, but if you really do research and look at the people who are doing tests, then you start to get a real background information and you're not just, coming up with guesses.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great leeway to talk to Max, but I want to point out in particular, you did a great episode of Free Talk Live, because you will guest co-host on that often enough, where you were talking about this black snow conspiracy. Right. and people, and this is the thing with the internet, it's a blessing and a curse, because this information hits you so fast that if you're not willing to go with the scientific method, if you're not willing to go with falsifying your beliefs and claims, you will really you'll believe what you're reading before anybody even says anything. I mean, and tons of people were saying, "Oh yeah, look, this black snow."
Just to spell out what the background is. That what happened? It was like a really early snow in the south or something. In Georgia, the snow went very far south, reached very far south, and people thought that the snow was made of plastic because that was going around the internet, and people were holding lighters up to snowballs and wondering why the snowballs weren't melting and dripping all over the place, and why the lighter left a black stain on it as though it was burning like styrofoam.
Yeah, so they thought it was all chemtrails.
Right. that whatever they're spraying in the air was making the snow, because they didn't know that when you burn butane, it leaves residue, and they didn't know that capillary action in a snowball, when you have lots of small particles of ice, are going to wick water into the rest of the snowball.
Right.
They actually thought that the snowball was burning like plastic.
Yeah.
Which really, I mean, I don't think that it should take much more than a basic thought to think there's not going to be able to be that much plastic spread across. And it really doesn't take that much effort, I think, but
Yeah. So, Max, I mean, the question to you, what do you think the importance is for activists, in New Hampshire having knowledge and awareness about, science?
Yeah, so I do have a few thoughts on this. One that helps me personally is to know what other activists here are interested in science and biotech, the areas that I'm in. And that helps people create startup companies, valuable products and services, to be able to pair up with one another and create valuable things. And that does a lot of good for the local economy to increase people's ability to basically take care of themselves, to be self-responsible, and to trade with others. So knowing one another and what other things that people in New Hampshire are into is helpful to connect in these different areas of expertise in science and technology. One other important aspect of knowing about science and tech in New Hampshire is that because a lot of these things are so high-tech, they tend to be incredibly valuable. So if you're looking for kinds of work that might be able to pay a lot of money or to be able to create a lot of value, a lot of times these high-tech things are very valuable. So I think that's good to consider too.
Yeah, absolutely. Steve, do you have any thoughts on the importance of tech knowledge for activists? Is it just to maybe give you a break so that you don't have to constantly be firemanning the network?
My answer to this, I think, was kind of going to lead into our next question.
Sure,
a little bit actually. I was going to share a story. When I first moved to Keene, I was doing some Drupal development work, and I like to go to tech type gatherings, and like I started a 2600 meeting here in Keene, which is the first Friday of every month. We meet at 7 o'clock at local burger and just have some burgers and talk tech.
2600 is the Hacker Quarterly. It's a very popular magazine, and a lot of communities have kind of built around it. It's a great publication if anyone wants.
Yeah, in the back of the magazine, the back cover, I think it is, they have a listing of meetings all over the world. So if you want to start one in your area, they ask you to try to get a group before you just write them. So we had a group, so we wrote them and said we're having a meeting every on 7 o'clock at local burger, and it's kind of a funny story. The reason why it's the first Friday of every month, it's the first Friday of the month all over the world. So part of it had to do with some government harassment that one of the meetings experienced. So they decided, well, if we have the meetings all over the world at the same time, they can't be everywhere.
Pretty clever. So you were doing some Drupal development, right?
So when I first moved to New Hampshire, I was and I knew there was a Drupal users group in Manchester, and I knew nothing about it. And I thought, so I'm gonna go check out this Drupal meetup group and meet some people that I don't know. And I got there a little early. I sat down in the room that it was supposed to be in, waiting for people to show up, and the first person to walk in was Brian Travis, who was a Free Stater, and then next thing I know, Seth Cohn walks in, and more than half the meeting was Free Staters, and I wasn't even expecting a single one to be a Free Stater. I just didn't know anything about it. I was like, Drupal users group, I'll go show up to that, and it's kind of funny how it as far as as far as liberty activists are really taking over the scene of technology in New Hampshire.
Yeah, and part of that is, Drupal is relative to web development.
Right.
And part of that is, and actually it seems like a lot of Free Staters are people in the tech field, and that's because that can be seemingly done from anywhere. As long as you've got an internet connection, you can do this sort of thing. And so you see that as very relevant to even having a job in that so that you can be a part of the community, even come here. Would that be accurate, Steve?
I think that's accurate. The other thing is it might be one of those things where a lot of people found out about the Free State Project and found libertarianism or whatever through the internet.
Sure.
So the people who are going to be on the computer the most are probably the IT people. So they're most likely to come to the ideas or find out about the Free State Project because they're spending too much time on the browser. And
yeah, it's interesting. It's a wonder if it's a cause and effect, because a lot of Silicon Valley, a lot of tech people do seem to be, honestly, anarchists of different flavors and colors, certainly. But what brings one to the other, which chicken or egg, who knows? But yeah, it is interesting how people, certainly can meet up, much like they were talking about the Bitcoin meetups earlier, the same effect. And I think that is a good lead up to question number 2, which is what is the potential, for tech and biotech, science startups, software companies, game companies, whatever, in New Hampshire? Steve, actually, why don't I start with you? Do you have any other comment on that? On what is the potential? Or is that your previous story?
I think my previous story kind of covered it. I'll let Johnson go.
Sure. Okay.
Stuff on this one.
So I did some research to answer this question.
Wait a minute, you use the scientific method?
Sure.
Part of it.
So, yeah. So, according to the Boston Globe, New Hampshire was ranked 9th in the country in tech employment in 2012. The average asking price for office space around Manchester is about $11 per square foot. However, in Kendall Square in Cambridge, Massachusetts, it hovers around $50 per square foot. So obviously there's a huge cost advantage to New Hampshire in terms of tech companies starting up here. So there's no sales tax. The personal tax burden is among the lowest in the country, according to the Tax Foundation. It's a nonprofit in DC. They did some research into that. And there's very large companies. So there's some companies here like Digital Equipment Corporation, Equal Logic, which was a data storage company that Dell bought, was here. Softdesk Incorporated out of Henniker. They were sold to Autodesk, which is they're a 3D AutoCAD kind of company, and Dean Kamen.
In Manchester.
Yeah, Segway.
This is the guy that invented the Segway, along with a whole slew of incredible technologies that are even still just coming out.
So, there are a lot of tech companies, a lot of tech opportunities in New Hampshire, and there should be more. And actually, the other thing that I did to research this question is I went and I looked at the Business Inc. Top 5,000 companies in the United States and filtered it down to New Hampshire. And I was looking at the different companies that are on, that are the top, either 3-year growth or top revenue in New Hampshire. And of those companies that made the Inc. Top 5,000, 61% of them are tech companies.
That's amazing.
So,
okay. Yeah, and certainly with Massachusetts, just across the border, very short drive is, iRobot, a whole slew of tech companies that are, a stone's throw away from just crossing the border. And in fact, this isn't a tech company, but in Nashua, the Massachusetts town just outside of Nashua had a Trader Joe's. That Trader Joe's closed down a year or two ago and just moved a mile down the street just to be in New Hampshire. So so there's a lot of advantages, and companies are already doing it, tech or not. It's certainly happening. Did you have more, Johnson? Or
sure. I'd just like to see more companies spread out too, from and get farther into New Hampshire from that Boston border. I don't think that it's necessary for them, again, because technology can be located anywhere.
Sure.
And as more and more fiber and as more wireless technologies get installed that are improving the bandwidth of New Hampshire, I think that these companies can be located anywhere, and it's advantageous. I think in the long run for these companies to really think about that, because people are going to, especially as decentralization increases for all this type of stuff, people are going to want to be working more from home in general, and they're going to want to work in nicer environments, and I think New Hampshire is perfect for that.
Right. So Max, what do you feel? What are the potentials for, say more a startup? We talked about some big businesses and medium businesses. What about for a startup?
So in my area of science and tech, I did notice a few interesting things about New Hampshire. And then one potential downside that I've seen so far, this is mostly anecdotal. First of all, one of the really attractive things about New Hampshire that I'm excited about, and one of the reasons why I moved here about a year ago, was that the no income tax, state income tax. So one of the projects I work on is I work on research reagents. I basically try and manufacture them, and they're very expensive. And once my manufacturing process gets working, I could go from having no revenues to having hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars of revenue in the same year. I was previously working on the same project in California, where I want to say the top income tax bracket, just for the state income tax, is around 13%, and that's on top of federal income taxes. So New Hampshire was really attractive for me to kind of incubate my biotech business here, my manufacturing business. And when I do get that manufacturing process completed and I start selling products, then I'm already located and as a resident in a no income tax state. So that's great. Another anecdotal thing about science and tech that I thought was pretty nice about New Hampshire that I've experienced so far was that when I was looking around New Hampshire, I visited Nashua, I visited Manchester, Keene, Lebanon. Something I noticed that was really attractive to me is that a lot of the zoning boards in these cities are actually really laid back. And so the reason why I mentioned the zoning boards is that there's some biotech that can be very dangerous, that some people work with deadly viruses and terrible chemicals and things like that, so you have to be careful how you treat those. And then there's the other end of the spectrum, that things are kind of very simple, not dangerous, kind of working with everyday chemicals that isn't a big deal. In some other states that I've worked in, some of those zoning board people are very, very aggressive. They treat everyone as if you're working with like HIV or Ebola, and it's like totally scary. When really you're like, mixing colors together and changing the pH. Like you shouldn't be regulated that hard. And so what I noticed in New Hampshire, like for one example, I looked around in Enfield, which is a little east of Lebanon, and they were so laid back about locating a biotech business there. He asked me, someone on the zoning board asked me, what kind of chemicals are you using? I made him a list of, like the stuff I bought. He said, oh, yeah, come here. We want you to make jobs. Come over here. And so they were really very welcoming and accommodating for locating my biotech business. I'm in Lebanon now, but I did consider Enfield. One potential downside that I've seen, this might be my location, is that kind of different to technology with internet and web work, is that with biotech work, there's significant network effects in that if you locate in a place where you can interact with a lot of other biotech people, that's very helpful because biology is extremely, extremely complicated. And so people tend to specialize and know a few things pretty well and everything else they're ignorant about. And the reason why that's helpful to kind of be in the same place with a lot of them is that you can pick each other's brains. And so being in the same place is very important. So me being near Dartmouth right now is interesting. And as you mentioned, Brian, being near Boston, either in Nashville or even in Manchester, is also pretty attractive.
Sure, yeah. I mean, does anybody here really want to leave the government up, controlling science? Anyone? Raise your hand. Yeah, okay. Unfortunately, it kind of does right now. Yeah. So we definitely, you want to be listening to this, to find out how that's not happening.
I've actually got a question for Max. To that.
Sure.
Do you see any technology emerging now? I mean, I know you were talking about proximity with other people needing to discuss biotech because it's so complicated. Do you see any technologies coming out now or emerging that are allowing that level of communication or even approaching that level of communication that would allow you to have discussions on that level remotely? Is there anything that is emerging, or are things that are close to good enough but maybe not quite, or whatnot, that would allow that need for proximity to go away?
That's a great question. That's kind of a grayscale where you can have a little bit of interaction and then like you're one-on-one in the same room. I have done quite a bit of like telepresence or telecommuting with people that I know in the biotech industry in other states. I have one guy I'm collaborating with in New York, in Syracuse, New York, and then some other people in California. So we do use Skype and conference calls, video or just audio conferencing fairly often, and that is a big help. I don't know if there's any other technology that could kind of enhance the bandwidth like that. I've heard of something like a virtual telepresence where you might leave a Skype video chat window open right in your lab. So as you're sitting working, you have a computer in front of you with the video of another lab that's 2,000 miles away, and you guys can almost hang out and share ideas. From my experience, a lot of kind of serendipity comes from hanging out in the same room, right, staring at data going, what the hell does this mean? And then someone else chimes in and says, oh, what about that? So increasing that bandwidth would definitely be valuable, I think.
Yeah, there's at least at the moment, there's no real, at least inexpensive replacement for having like a community to like right in the same room, like you said, serendipity to come together with. This question more to Steve and Johnson. As it relates to activism, do you feel that looking into, and we'll talk about some technology solutions later on, but are there any older technologies, something like not a smartphone, or not even a computer, that you think would be important for New Hampshire activists to use, to consider, or are these things pretty much gone by the wayside?
Could I go back just a
Yeah.
I think New Hampshire is a very good state for startups. As Max said, the regulations were pretty laid back. And if you look at one of the things I was looking up before I came here is best states for startups and getting all these top 10 lists and top or state rankings 1 through 50. And one thing I noticed is New Hampshire was actually all over the map on a lot of these top 10 lists and stuff. Sometimes it was ranked pretty poorly, in fact. But if you actually looked into what they were using to what they were using to rank these, a lot of times is like, how much money is the government going to give me? Type of things to rank, and things that really don't have anything to do with this, the state, either geographically or
government. It doesn't have anything
government.
to do with the advantages.
It has nothing to do with the advantages. Like, for example, one thing that I think New Hampshire has a whole lot of potential for to be the next Silicon Valley. There's certain things that are lacking, but as Brian was talking about, like the Trader Joe's moving a mile down the road. If you look at it was Reuters, I forget which polling agency did it. It was Gallup poll. They did a survey. They questioned people of every state, and they basically asked them, do you want to leave the state you're currently in? And New Hampshire was among the states that people least wanted to leave. And if you look at states that have big tech startups and stuff, like Massachusetts around the Boston area, or you look in California and stuff, they were ranked very poorly. People want to leave those places. So if you wanted to have a tech startup, I mean, especially with so many free-staters who want to move there, I don't think it's hard to recruit people, hey, move to New Hampshire. I know people who work at tech companies in Massachusetts, and all the employees are like, yeah, let's move the company to New Hampshire. It's not, so I think it'd be easy to get people. The regulations are pretty lax. Starting a business isn't too difficult to form an LLC and stuff. Some companies or some states, it's a nightmare just to fill an LLC out.
Sure. Yeah, that's really exciting to hear.
And so I really do think New Hampshire's got some potential. And one thing that I think it's also lacking is I think it could use a boost in venture capital funding. And I see people like Peter Thiel, who are proclaimed libertarians and giving money to the Seasteading Institute and stuff. And I've heard figures between $500,000 and $1 million, and I can't imagine. One idea that someone came and suggested was, we have these think tanks, in like Washington D.C. area, where they write white papers that basically state the obvious about how all this regulation is bad for the economy and stuff like that. How awesome would it be if we had essentially a hacker space in New Hampshire that where people could make their living like at these think tanks, basically designing tools for activists to use.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how much potential that would have.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because actually VentureBeat recently did a story where they were polling a lot of what they called elite tech company, VCs and CEOs of tech companies, and all of them said the number one thing getting in the way of innovation was government regulation. Every single one of them said that was the biggest issue. And I think it's interesting too. Tim Draper and other VCs have been recommending a 6-state initiative for California, where they want to break it up into little, smaller states, because a huge state like that is it's antithetical to getting things done. I mean, there's a great book called, I think it's Small is Beautiful, and in that the quote is that anywhere there's a problem, there's something too big, and I think it's absolutely true every single time. And New Hampshire is fantastic in the fact that it is a small state. To where things really can get done. Go ahead, Johnson.
I think there's a couple other potential advantages there too, with the what Steve was saying about people not wanting to leave New Hampshire. One of a big strategic advantage for a company is to engage in brain drain. In other words, to get the best and the brightest to leave other companies and to come to work for them, and to really develop that brand and that the potential of that company to make things amazing. And so there's been a lot of stories of employees being traded back and forth between Apple and Facebook and Google, and where people are moving to, which is the best company. And that's why Google has been known for being infamous with their dining areas and their parking and their babysitting for employees and their playrooms and toys and crazy stuff to make people come to these companies. And it seems to me that there would be a huge advantage in having a company located in a place that people want to live and where they're not being completely burdened by regulations and taxes. And it would make sense for some of these companies to come here also because of the fact that so many of even the upper echelons of these companies, at least they start their careers as very liberty-minded.
Yeah,
some of them end up a little less so. One person that comes to mind, unfortunately, is the story of MakerBot, which was swallowed by Stratasys because of some of the actions of Bree Pettis, who started to be, he started out very open source minded, and just everyone around him, or a lot of people around him, just talked about how he kind of just turned darker and darker and darker in terms of how open he wanted to be with everything as time went on, and just getting kind of greedy, and ended up selling out to Stratasys and then getting fired immediately.
Yeah.
So that was, a very sad story. But I would think that there are a lot of upper echelons, CEOs and executives at these companies that are probably, like you said in these surveys, want less government regulation and want less less involvement in the government in their companies. And I would think that would be ideal for them to move to New Hampshire, make their employees happier, drain employees from other companies, and not have to worry about being burdened.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, certainly a form of activism could be had that is really just making sure that people realize how attractive New Hampshire is to tech companies because of things that they already realize, and things of that nature. So I want to go back to the question of, what older technologies, I don't want to spend too much time on this one, but what older technologies do you think still perhaps have use? Like radio seems to be very popular in Keene. Using personal radios. Do you think that these things should continue to be used, or are there others that aren't being used, maybe that should?
I disagree with the question.
Okay.
So the way you worded the question when you, because I got asked for the question in advance, so I could prepare. Is the way you said is that, you said, how do you, as it relates to activism, do you feel that looking into older technology, using radio more as compared to smartphones, is an important thing for New Hampshire activists to consider? And I sort of responded this with, well, no. I don't think that the Balfour radios that we use here in Keene especially are older technology. They're not. And I don't think that radio is an older technology either, any more than electricity is.
Sure, it's fair.
So I don't think that just because a technology has been around or known about for a longer period of time makes it older, but I think that the best tool for the job is whatever technology suits that need. And for example, with radios, using that example, I think many times they're far superior to cell phones because with the texts and the calls and cell phones, people are getting inundated. And getting a message from the network of activists here, when it's on a radio, it's a separate device and it comes through immediately and it's right there.
And it's federated.
Right.
It's not. It doesn't require another service.
Right. So it's immediate and it comes out of the radio and into your ears directly. There's no putting it aside and whatnot like you would with a text or you would with. We've all started using this Telegram app recently, which Steve hates.
We can talk about that later.
Broken.
We can talk about that later.
But some of those things though they can easily be ignored because it's like, okay, I've got an alert from Telegram that comes in with 50 other alerts from Facebook, email, Twitter, wherever, and so that just gets lost in the.
There's something to be said for focus, and there's something to be said also for a technology that does one thing and one thing really freaking well, And I definitely, I think a lot of tech in general, the ethereal idea of tech is actually going in that direction. Apps are getting more specific, and so maybe we're kind of going back to that. But Steve, beyond Telegram, do you have any thoughts on what I labeled as older tech that, like radios, do they have to use?
I was a ham radio operator, and I know that in natural disasters, the cell phone networks go down. The landlines are certainly down. Everything's down. There's no electricity. And one thing that the ham radio community is really good at is in a way, they're preppers. They have, a lot of them have generators, they have batteries, they have portable antennas they can bring with them. And when disaster strikes, ham radio operators are always there. And I look back to like the uprising in places like Egypt and stuff, where what did the government do during the uprisings? They jammed the cell phone networks, they turned off the cell phone networks, they turned off the internet connections, they cut the fiber lines. They did everything to shut people up.
And even when they say now, like, well, they used Facebook and Twitter for Arab Spring and all that, now everybody's playing ball with governments in deleting tweets, deleting posts, and all this stuff, so that's not as reliable as what you're discussing.
Right. I mean, when it comes to any software or anything like that, I'm always skeptical when you're relying on somebody else. If you're relying on someone else's server, you're relying on someone else's internet connection, it's a potential problem.
Central point of failure.
Right. And I do agree with the radios. I mean, for one thing, is if I'm somewhere and I'm trying to film something, when I'm using my camera phone to videotape it, I might not be able to see a text or answer a text that's coming in. But the radio, because it's a secondary device, sometimes having separate discrete devices is better than these all-in-one things. That's really convenient. And I agree with the Facebook and too many notifications, because I don't have anything on my phone but text messages. If you want to get in contact with me, send me a text message or call me, because it's funny because I'll be at an event and somebody will ask me if I'm there, like so-and-so at the event we're at, and I'll get home and I'll see it on Facebook, and I'm like, they were there, I was there, but I don't have I don't have Facebook messages sent to my phone. Sorry.
Right. Yeah, no, I think those are great points to bring up. To really solid.
So could the government jam the cell phone systems and stuff like that if something goes wrong, and or wrong for them at least? Yes, they're probably going to do it. So I think these $30 PAL things, if you wanted to, you could transmit on any frequency you want within a pretty wide range, and it would be very difficult for them to jam all those frequencies because you could change it to something
very close to themselves.
Yeah, if you changed it a couple kilohertz away from the frequencies they're using, they're not going to be able to jam themselves, right?
Yeah, no, great points to bring up. I do want to address quickly, I think a lot of people have recently heard about how Android 5.0 and how iOS devices, how they are blocking access from the police. Like the police can't, it's encrypted, and so the police, they can't access your device. This has been kind of a popular topic going around, but it's been proven that it's not so. There may be certain aspects of the device that can't be cracked, that the encryption cannot be cracked. But there was a Jason, some guy with a long, silly Jewish name. I know how. Yeah, no, I know how that is. Believe me. So that's why I changed mine. And he came up with the idea that if you can copy the pairing key of the device of the computer that you connect your mobile device to, that the pairing key will give you access to photos, to texts, to all these various things. And it's not that hard. And he's not the NSA. This is a guy doing it, on his 9 to 5. Okay, as to where the NSA has limitless, resources potentially. So do not count on that. That's why I think it's important to talk about using some older technologies. Also, just this week in Virginia, the Virginia Circuit Court said that a police officer, because iOS devices and some Android devices like Samsung have the fingerprint readers, Touch ID. And they did say that, yes, the law enforcement can compel you to give your fingerprint to access your device. So do keep that in mind, that does go against what's the Fifth Amendment rights.
That's not true. I don't know where you heard that from, but I've been reading about that for a while too. And
it was just 2 days ago.
They can't compel. There's a federal court case. There's a Supreme Court case that said that they cannot compel you to unlock your phone. Maybe they can compel you to give your fingerprint, and then
right,
they can somehow.
No, that's it. It's your fingerprints that they can.
But they would have to.
Your
they would
PIN
have
number
to hack
they
it.
can't.
They would have to like photocopy your fingerprint and like make it into a thing and then press it to the phone themselves. They can't compel you to press your finger to the phone.
Yes, they can. They can do whatever they want to do.
They do it to. They take your fingerprints when they arrest you anyway.
Right.
So and if people refuse to get fingerprinted, they're like, oh, they're refusing the process. Blah 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 blah.
Yeah. But I was going to say,
it's a big deal. So they already do compel you to give your fingerprints.
Yeah.
Now.
It's a new case. The Virginia Circuit Court said that, yes, the police officer can tell you to give your fingerprint on your device.
And fingerprint readers have been fooled by gummy bears for the longest time.
Or women's nipples. It's true. No, really. You can put it up to your nipple and it'll mimic the Touch ID. There you go. Sorry. I'm not saying how I know that.
I was going to say though that at least it's a step in the right direction with this encryption though, because
I agree.
Well, you can seize if there's a raid and in the raid they seize a computer and a phone, then they can unlock the phone. If that ID is required from the computer, the pairing ID, that negates all the roadside devices that they had before, which is where they could just take your phone and hook it up to a device and copy the entire device and have access to it, which is what they had before. They could crack the phones almost instantly on the side of the road.
Yeah.
That's gone.
Yeah.
That's major.
Right. No, and this is still great for, against other bad actors. I mean, no doubt, this is a step in the right direction. You're certainly right on with that. Before I get to the next question I have is for Matt specifically. Before I do that, we did have another panelist we're going to have here, and he was going to talk about game development, as in video games, but he is not here. But I actually am developing completely on my own, one-man show, a video game, and so I just want to touch on it very briefly. And my company is Zomia Offline Games, and you can go to zomiaofflinegames.com to find. The website's nothing serious right now, but in any case, this is something actually yesterday that Chris Campbell mentioned, an area that activism is not addressing, which is fiction. People getting into fiction. And video game development is just another way of doing great storytelling. And I think this is something that a lot of people, there's great software out there, RPG Maker, there's a whole slew out there, where anybody, you don't have to have any programming knowledge, okay? And you could program a game and just tell a great story, and an interactive one at that, with voluntarist ideals or whichever. And I think that's an area not a lot of people are exploring. I'm happy to be doing it, but I'd love to see a whole lot more. And it's a great way to honestly make some money while you're at it. Okay, I mean, because it's inexpensive for you to develop. It just takes your time and the cost of the software, which often is not expensive either. And then it's pretty much a pure profit. And if you sold it for Bitcoin, I mean, who's to know how much you're making from doing it. So anyway, but I want to get to the next question, and this is for Max. What do you feel is the importance of science, biohacking, biotech in regards to achieving more freedom in our lifetime? Because that's really the goal of activism, is to get more freedom in our lives, right? And so what do you think is the importance of those areas specifically for this? Because you are really knee deep in this.
Yeah, that's a great question. I gave this some thought, and so the area that I work in medical science and medical research is very tightly linked to freedom, or the lack thereof. And what I'm referring to is things like the FDA and how drugs that are used for medical interventions are regulated and how they're approved for use. And that's a very big issue right now. There were some studies that came out fairly recently that kind of concluded something about this FDA and medical intervention approval process. And one of the things they found was that they compared drugs that the FDA allowed to go through to be accepted that ended up hurting people, and they compared that to the number of people what happened when the FDA withheld a drug for longer than might have otherwise been necessary if the FDA wasn't in existence. And what they found was that the presence of the FDA actually killed far more people than did the FDA's withholding drugs that were unsafe. And it was a very interesting study, and maybe some of you were at PorcFest in 2013. There was a woman by the name of Mary Ruwart, gave a very, very excellent talk on this very topic. And so in my area of research in biotech and aging science, I see this all the time in the networks of scientists that I work with. We ponder this very frequently. We have to ask ourselves if we're trying to improve health in the human condition by improving the way our biochemistry works so that we don't get these diseases, or we slow down, reverse the progression of these diseases, how are we going to get that by the FDA? And that's a serious problem, because a lot of what we're trying to do in the networks I work in, we're trying to actually slow or prevent the disease from happening at all. So let's say some of you in the room right now might have some cholesterol in your arteries, and I may want to give you a drug that keeps that cholesterol from building up. But that's not a disease. Cholesterol in your arteries is not a disease. Everyone has cholesterol in their arteries from like being a baby and then all the way through your life. So until you have a heart attack, I can't actually treat you. But I don't want to treat you after you have a heart attack. I want to prevent you from having the heart attack in the first place. And so as far as regulation, that's a very gray area. Treating something that isn't a formal diagnosis with some kind of specific disease. So definitely biotech and medical research and science is very intimately involved with what you put in your body, what you're allowed to put in your body.
Yeah, I mean, definitely a saying I like to say often is that one of the best ways to do activism against the government is to be insanely healthy, like ridiculously healthy. I mean, just to picture how important Obamacare is to so many people. If you're just keeping yourself really, really healthy, that's not even something you have to worry about. So yeah, I think those are solid points. Did you have anything else on that? Or?
No, that's a good point you have there about being healthy.
Sure. Last question here, and then we'll open it up to the audience. Do you have, any of you, we'll start with Johnson, do you have any great resources, because I know you do, or tools for the audience to look into to get started in the areas we've discussed? Before you comment on that, I just want to say that during the raffle that Daryl Perry was having, he was giving away a USB drive that had Tails on it. Last year, I did recommend that.
I won it.
You won it, fantastic. And I think that is something that certainly is a good step, into getting a great tool into getting some privacy and doing some activism.
So these cover definitely some of the areas that we've talked about, and I decided to kind of try and be clever and check up the video. And I printed a huge QR code.
Oh, fantastic! Yeah.
So
we'll get that on the screen.
I will hold this to the camera. I don't know if it's going to be able to be filmed on the camera, but
this works. One time, a reporter actually put up a Bitcoin paper wallet that had $20 on it, and they showed it on the TV screen live while they were recording, and a bunch of very clever people just went and scanned it, and somebody got $20 out of it. So this definitely works.
So essentially what this is it's from a blog called Lifehacker, which is it's essentially a blog about tips for improving your life, like how to open a jar better, or best way to plant your garden, but also technology tips as well. And they have put together some of the best application packages. So this page is actually for the best applications to download for Windows, Mac, Linux, for your phones, for Android, iPhone, Windows Phone, whatever device you happen to use, BlackBerry.
Yes, and BlackBerry.
And essentially these applications are some of the most useful pieces of software that you can find for free. And I highly recommend the Lifehacker application packs. I mean, I will probably download 80 to 90% of most of the programs that come in these individual packages, so they're definitely worthwhile if you want to replace, for example, Microsoft Office or certain other things. They have all these useful tools. A couple other things I want to mention is, again, from Lifehacker, they have, if you have to Google this one though, Lifehacker Night School. If you want to learn how to teach yourself to do something at all that's technology involved, if you want to learn how to write music with your computer, or do music production or audio production, or if you want to do video production, or if you want to learn how to take apart and build a computer, or if you want to learn how to do any number of topics, Lifehacker has these series that they put together called Lifehacker Night School, and they are very good. Each individual course that they put together is completely free and extremely impressive. So I would definitely recommend checking those out if there is anything in particular that you're looking to learn. Again, and on that, Khan Academy on YouTube, KAHN, Khan Academy is basically if you want to get a master's degree and you don't want to pay for college. just go watch all the Khan Academy videos if it's a subject that you want to learn. And then the last one I have to mention is codeacademy.com. So if you want to learn a program, that would be a really good, again, free resource, place to go that you can learn to program.
Awesome. If you want to start lining up, if you have questions, there's the microphone over there. That's
Wait, sorry, I'm getting corrected here. What,
that's right.
I said,
It's Code Academy. There's no A in the middle.
really?
Yeah.
I just went there like right before today. I thought it was Code. I believe it's Code Academy.
All right. Everybody bought a new domain.
Yeah, codeacademy.com.
All right, Steve, do you have any great tools or resources?
What I was going to suggest, and unfortunately I forgot the exact URL, but the state of New Hampshire actually does have quite a bit of information, like in business development and stuff, and they have a website where you can go and they have a comparison to absolutely every state in the country, where it'll compare, here's the sales tax, comparing California or wherever to New Hampshire. And it even goes down to like how much unemployment taxes are going to, or unemployment insurance is going to cost you and stuff like that. They even have like what's a gallon of milk cost in New Hampshire compared to Vermont or compared to California. It's like 20 sheets of paper, like 10-point font, just a line-by-line comparison of numbers. It's and a bunch of other stuff, but it's pretty interesting. And I do think if you're thinking about starting a startup, and you're a liberty-minded person, I think you should attend PorkFest. You might want to move your business to PorkFest or to New Hampshire.
Yeah, one visit to PorkFest and everything changes.
Yeah,
for everybody.
if you haven't visited PorkFest,
You haven't been there.
Yeah, great points. Max.
Yeah, I have, there's a lot of resources I could point somebody to. I'm going to narrow them down just a little bit. The company I've worked for about 4 years now is called SENS Research Foundation. So they fund quite a bit of research in this area of aging research. You can find them at SENS.org. Another one, I like Brian's advice of staying as healthy as possible. Biology is awful complicated. One company that's really good and very honest with their assessment of the science literature and giving suggestions on how to stay alive and not, get chronic diseases of aging is called Life Extension Foundation. That's LEF.org. From my studying the science literature, trying to figure out how to stay healthy myself, there are a handful of very valuable health hacks or biohacks you can do to kind of keep track of a couple blood parameters to make sure your biochemistry is working well. LEF does those tests. They sell supplements that are high purity and high quality. And then if you want to hear more from me, I have a website. It's called Long Life Labs. So it's longlifelabs.org. And there I kind of evaluate the science literature and kind of report on the best ways to keep yourself alive and healthy. Give you updates on scientific medical research in my areas. And it's targeted to people who are not scientists. It's kind of to interpret it so you can use it for yourself to keep yourself alive and healthy.
Yeah, fantastic. Definitely, Max, all three of these gentlemen are some of the smartest men I know, so you definitely want to keep tabs on what they're up to and what they provide for you, no doubt about it. So let's go ahead and let's get to the questions. We'll start off. Chris?
Yep.
Go for it.
How you doing, guys? I was going to ask, what are your favorite things about the Android operating system, Johnson? But I'm going to skip that one.
Johnson notoriously is having issues with the Android.
A couple things come up. We talk about attracting tech jobs and tech companies to New Hampshire. And to me, it's similar to what the FSP does. We're trying to attract people that are liberty-minded here. What can we do, or do you have any ideas about what we could do to attract those companies here outside of the usual state methods, which means I'm going to let you go for 10 years without paying any taxes, and we're going to do this and that? Are there some ideas around creating sort of a free business project thing? Given the fact that so many of us are in IT or in tech, and what can we do to get outreach out there outside of the government channels?
Yeah, I have something I can say to that. That's a great question. I've studied entrepreneurship quite a bit, and particularly biotech entrepreneurship. And I like what Steve alluded to earlier about how I haven't become aware of very much venture capital that's here in New Hampshire and looking for ventures to invest in. Maybe there is some, and certainly there's a considerable amount in Boston. But in my experience, there's almost a chicken and the egg problem. You want to have, in order to attract more people who are technologists who can create jobs and create valuable enterprises, you also have to be able to give them the resources to do the research and development, to build the product, to market the product. But you also have to have the people to do it. So you have the technologists, and then you have the people who are funding the technologists, and they have to meet in the same place. So I don't know, I'm not aware of how dense the technologists are here in New Hampshire, but you might make it more dense and more of them if there is a very active venture community or venture capital community here in New Hampshire. And so I don't know if anyone can participate in that, or yourself, or there's crowdfunding, right? There are projects that I've known that have become very popular and lucrative that have done things like Kickstarter to start a project like that. So something to keep in mind that everyone here could maybe participate in is this kind of small venture capital funding for crowdsourcing.
Yeah, I think like a New Hampshire Kickstarter would actually, like a particularly New Hampshire-based Kickstarter is a fantastic idea. Steve or Johnson, do you have any thoughts?
I think that New Hampshire is, because it's a desirable place to live, I think it's going to be a desirable place to start a business. And what I'm hoping to see is that people will want to move their businesses more and more, or at least, if not move their businesses, expand their businesses and open a branch office of whatever business it is. And if you're a small business owner in the Free State Project who's planning on moving, once the trigger the move happens, but you have a small business that's you don't want to move, that's very understandable. You have your roots set in the soil where you are, but it's kind of funny because it's not just the tech industry. With it, if you go to an event like PorkFest, you'll meet so many people. If you run a machine shop and you need people who have machining background, or welders, or carpenters, or whatever it is, if you're a restaurant owner in another state and you want to move to New Hampshire, there's people here who they know the restaurant business. They might not own a restaurant themselves, but they can help you find good deals on restaurant equipment, so you could start one here. There's a lot of resources if you're liberty-minded.
Real strength of community, and like the option of satellite.
And people want to see your business succeed here in New Hampshire. So reach out if talk to your employees. Maybe they're sick of being in Connecticut or Massachusetts or New York or New Jersey. Maybe they want to get out. They might all be like, let's all move right now.
Yeah, or like Max was saying, how Enfield was just like open arms. Come on, please. Yes, we want you here.
I definitely think it's an issue that needs to be addressed from multiple fronts. I think that activists for the Free State Project are already addressing one aspect of this by helping to approach and roll back anti-business regulations. So I think that's my microphone is coming out. I think that that's a huge, to draw businesses in general, but I think that what also needs to happen is that just entrepreneurs in New Hampshire need to...
Swap microphones.
Yeah. Entrepreneurs in New Hampshire need to basically build tech businesses here. And I think that's going to attract more tech businesses if businesses get developed here. And I think along that line, or along that point, whatever can be done, and again, I think this is sort of a government issue, is that the cost of education, obviously there's an education bubble right now. I think that bubble needs to pop and the cost of education needs to come down, and these ridiculous state school educations that are just hundreds of thousands of dollars, or well, not hundreds of thousands, but at least tens of thousands, if not approaching $100,000 or more dollars for an education.
New Hampshire's
it just needs
really,
to stop.
Yeah, and New Hampshire's really ahead of the curve legislatively about schooling, as to where there's like not really any restrictions, as I understand it. So if you don't want your kid to go to school, they don't have to.
Right, sure, but that's not what I mean. No, what I mean is getting the cost of education and getting people in quality tech education, and not having not having all the quality tech educators drained off to be indoctrinated in these state-funded schools because they are going there because that's where the salaries are, and so they're part of this particular culture, at these schools, and that. It's like where else? If you wanted to start a competing tech education school, are you going to be able to make money at it, or are you going to have to go and work for the government institution, the state school, in order to teach and succeed at that? And the answer is probably now that the population in New Hampshire isn't big enough to support a real large network of private tech education companies, as you would see in some of these other states like California and Florida and Texas and more populous areas. And if we could get that going a little bit more strongly and have community tech education that is affordable, that isn't so independent. I mean, I mentioned I said Code Academy, but it is Code Academy, although both domains work. But Code Academy and Khan Academy, those are great if you're teaching yourself, but again, when you're talking about proximity, sometimes that's very important to be working with other people when you want to get that level of education.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy has a question.
Great panel so far, guys. I really enjoyed it.
Usually we come to you for answers, so this is weird.
So this is a question about entrepreneurship. And it's the technological solutions or the tech startups that end up really changing the world for more freedom. And it doesn't matter if you're in New Hampshire, you can enjoy Bitcoin anywhere in the world. You can use Uber, even though they've kind of turned evil. But they really were solving a state-created problem with their business model. So if someone wants to start a startup business, or a tech startup in particular, do you think that those really world-changing ideas for freedom come out of a purposeful desire to mix activism with their business? Or do you think that it's more effective to just focus on starting a business that's going to be profitable and then solve a problem, and hopefully it'll change the world for more freedom, and not mix the two?
Anyone?
That's a good and a very difficult question. Yeah, good question. So the thoughts that your question inspired from me is that I think I've seen from studying the entrepreneurship literature and anecdotes is that both kinds of strategies end up working. Some people start out with a very purpose-driven control, wanting to change the system, and then they end up being successful. But other people kind of accidentally change the system and end up being really successful. This is not a lot of research supports what I'm about to say, but my kind of take or anecdote on this topic might be that I find that the most valuable things to be done also changes the system. Like I talked about medical interventions with aging diseases, and then something like cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin and things like that is really a kind of system changer. I tend to think that that these are going to be more and more prevalent, or the strategy that's going to be more prevalent is the one where you start out with a purpose. And I wonder if this might be because a lot of what I think of as easier problems have already been solved, and so there's a lot of hard, difficult stuff left over, like the way we organize these huge societies of billions of people, or how we trade and what kind of currency we use, or what I'm talking about, medical research for age-related diseases. And so I think because these answers to these problems are so valuable and they're so difficult, it's less likely that you'll kind of stumble upon them like, whoops, I just cured cancer. Gosh, I just meant to make a great yogurt. Like, how did that happen? You kind of have to set out to do it because it's really hard. But that's my own anecdotal take.
Anyway, Steve, did you have something?
I do find it strange that New Hampshire isn't the Bitcoin capital of the world for Bitcoin startups, because they did, for example, when Overstock.com first accepted Bitcoin, per capita, New Hampshire had way more Bitcoin orders than any other state. and I do think that in a way, like, I think of like the open source movement. It has changed the way we do computer technology. If you look at a company like Red Hat, it's open source software. They're making their money on they're making most of their money on support and custom programming and stuff like that. But Red Hat does make Red Hat Enterprise Linux and charge a subscription fee for it, but they're not hurting, even though they're giving away their software. Compared to Microsoft, which charges an arm and a leg for their operating systems and software. And if you look at since Red Hat's IPO, last I checked, it significantly outperformed Microsoft, and at least at their stock price. CentOS is basically recompiled. CentOS is basically Red Hat Enterprise Linux, that they recompile it and give it out for free. Hasn't hurt Red Hat any, it doesn't seem.
Right.
So it's not really liberty related, but I do kind of think that like intellectual property is kind of a creation of the government.
Yeah, it's not required to make a ton of money.
And if you are an inventor, and you don't have an army of lawyers to back you up, you might as well not even file a patent.
Sure.
In many cases.
Sure. Johnson, did you have any thoughts?
So I find it an interesting question because I thought my first reaction, my instinct was to say, well, I think that you want to start a business first because then you're going to be able to have your financial funding and whatnot to be able to actually move forward with your goal. But then I neglected to mention this in my sort of about me, but I actually have 2 projects that I'm working on currently that normally when I do any of these speeches and when I'm on Free Talk Live, I never have anything to self-promote. And for years and years and years, finally I do. I'm starting and I'm working on, and you can find on Facebook, I'm Infinite Twilight Designs. So if you're looking for graphic design work, I do that there, and that's my sort of personal business. And I have no website for that yet. I haven't even gotten there. I started to work on it, and that's the business aspect. You would think that would be the first place I'd go, but I've also started Shire Sharing Keen. And so now, within like a day or 2 days, I had Shire Sharing Keen up and ready to accept donations. So that's the one that was the activism one, and because I had the defined definition and purpose, and it wasn't so nebulous and what do I want to do with it, I got it up and did it right away. So I think it just comes down to where the passion is, and I think money tends to follow passion. So you want to have money to be able to move forward with your passion, but I think the passion is what creates the money. So if you follow that passion long enough, eventually, you want to hope that the money will come, unless your idea is really, really terrible. And even still, some people, you probably still shouldn't give up, even if your idea is terrible.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do want to say quickly that certainly having a community like you do in New Hampshire allows you to follow your passions without judgment. And that is so key. Most people would, like myself, I'm developing a game, people would say that's insane, you're not going to do anything with that, you're just one person. No, everybody I've talked to in the Liberty community has been incredibly supportive of my venture. So, that's a wonderful thing to have built in. And another quick thing for startups, please do always consider, because I don't hear this enough, when you're trying, the key to a startup is, what problem am I solving? Please consider what problems you're going to create as well, okay? that gets missed in the equation. It's like, how many more problems are you going to create with what you're trying to solve? Not to say that you will, but consider that you might. So I think that'll wrap it up. Thank you so much. This has been the Keenevention 2014 Tech Panel. Yay, woo, yay, clap, 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 yay, woo, fantastic. Anyway, boy, does it get any better than that? I thought there's just so much information getting laid out in that, as far as, especially like with startups. In fact, that wasn't even totally the plan, was for it to be talking about startups in general, but that's kind of how it ended up happening. And the beauty of it that I thought was that this was all about doing startups without permission, and not even without permission. I repeated it a few times because I love how Max Pito was saying, look, the cities here or the towns here, yeah, come on in. Who cares about zoning? Come on in and bring your business. I mean, where do you get that? With no questions asked almost. Especially when it's like a biotech company. I mean, you'd think most towns would be scared to death of that existing around. It's like, well, we can need a permit for this, blah, 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 blah. And that just, as far as I understood it, that more or less wasn't so. Maybe down the line, maybe it would end up being that, who knows? But regardless, very attractive case, in my opinion. It's a very this panel proved it's a very attractive case for businesses and for people, individuals, to do startup ventures and to get involved with science and technology in New Hampshire itself. And of course, also just by and large, the importance of science and technology. Johnson made some great points early on about, activists knowing the scientific method and actually applying it. Because you don't want to, believe things, you don't want to hear something and just totally believe it just because of the source that it came from. You want to do, a little bit of your own individual research. And I thought that was a great point to open up with. Because I think that gets people excited, because when you hear about how empowering science is, and of course technology, by default with that, it gets you excited about it and wants you, and I think it makes people want to get involved. So I thought that was an awesome opener, and the whole panel was just really, really great. Anyway, total thanks to Ian Freeman for providing really both of these panels to happen. And, Keenevention was a great time. Again, I will be doing an episode, Stephanie and I will be doing an episode where we discuss that overall. And of course, total thanks to Stephanie for recording both of these. These were personal recordings that were made. There's going to be professional video released eventually, that Ian will be putting up at keenevention.info, via the YouTube channel or whatever. That will be up eventually. So video will be there, and I'll certainly announce when that happens, or, when that's released. But, just so you can have it right now, these are personal recordings that you are getting, and more or less uncut. Hope you enjoyed all this. And of course, if you did, please don't hesitate. Look in the show notes. You can donate to the show. I've gotten some very gracious donations recently. Thank you so much for those. Believe me, they help so much. They really do help me out. Also, of course, the PayPal link, if you want to donate via PayPal, is on the left-hand side of sovereigntech.com. You'll see a bunch of affiliate links there that you can use as well. But again, thank you so much for all that you've donated already. It's definitely allowed me to make these ventures and adventures a lot more possible and a lot more comfortable. No doubt about it. Please understand, it does help me immensely. So if you want to, you can donate to the show. There's a Bitcoin address, all kinds of cryptocurrencies you can donate with, or of course, PayPal. And then there are also, the affiliate links. Anyway, thank you again. Hope you enjoyed this. Please feel free to message me, or, actually, I'll tell you right now, there's a new email address, and you can find that new email address on the left-hand side of sovereigntech.com. It's brian@zomiaofflinegames.com. You are hearing that here first. sovereigntech@riseup.net is still available, but that is the new email address. There is a PGP key for that as well, which you can look it up at pgp.mit.edu, and there it is, and I'll also put it in the show notes. Carpe Lucem, everybody. And yeah, don't worry. Special, and then you got episode 99 coming up this week. Get ready for that. But another special yet this week as well. I'll see you on the other side.
You just experienced Sovryn Tech. Go to sovereigntech.com, that's SOVRYN tech.com, and connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovryn Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.